Now for the moment of truth. I've got the battery back in it. Now I am not putting the plastics on it quite yet because I want to make sure it's not tapping. I want to make sure it's running right. So let's go ahead and fire it up. So I have the seat pan back in just so I can have the battery. Whoop. I clip the rear brake. Remember the bike's on its center stand. Much better. It's not tapping. Whoop. That idle speed's just a little high, maybe. I don't want to mess with it a whole lot because the wrencher's probably on. So it is spinning the rear wheel just a little bit. There we go. And now it's going to spin the rear wheel. So we're about right on the idle. Sounds like it's running pretty good. All that's left now is for me to change the oil on it and start putting the plastics back on it. Okay, I've spent a little time cleaning it up. You know, a clean scooter's a happy scooter. Even though she's a Chinese scooter, still if you take care of it, it'll take care of you. Alright, the way you put the floorboard back in, it's kind of reverse of how you take it out. You want to get these clips, or these little snaps to line up. And then it'll go in. Do the same for the other side. Oop. Just like that. Then we'll put the two bottom pieces in, and then we'll start bolting and screwing it all back together. Oops, just knocked over my WD-40. While I've had it apart, I've also cleaned up a lot of pieces. Like I'll clean all this up here before it goes back together so it'll look like that. And then get this bolted on, and then I put the two bottom lower parts on. And then I can put the tail back on it. Now to finish bolting in the floorboard, use these funky looking bolts. They've got a little shoulder on them. Drop down in there. You want them tight, you don't want them over tightened. Okay, the next part we're going to do is we're going to put this bottom trim panel on. These little ears point forward. And they fit into these little slots right there. And then this part here will lock together when you push it together. And just like that. Now it's ready for that to screw. And then I'm going to screw back here. Foot pegs just slide onto this little pin. And then until that hole there, right there, lines up. Then you put the bolt in with your 10mm ratchet. And again, I'm going to have to put this down because I need both hands. It was the same for this side. It's a little harder to get at. It's right down in there. Now, one word of warning while you're putting those screws in. You don't want to use a Makita or a DeWalt or a power drill or a power screwdriver of any kind. You want to do it by hand. And the reason why is it's just the plastic here that holds them. This screw is a self-tapping screw, so when they put it on, that didn't have any holes in it, and they just zip, 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 zip. And the problem is it makes it real weak as far as the threads go. So you want to be very gentle when you're putting these little plates back on. Alright, it's time to start putting on the rear shell. First thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that this little cable is in the keeper right here. I'll lift it up a little bit. Set it kind of on top like this so I can plug in the taillight assembly. Whoop. And then I'll slide it back and then forward. We're going to want those little ears, these little ears like right here, to go into these holes. And we're going to want this clip to line up with this here so we can put the screw in. Then of course it needs to be wiped down and cleaned up. And then we also need to hook up the trunk, or the latch for the seat. Okay, that cable end needs to go right into this little ear. Has a little hole in it right there. And then of course we have the bracket for the rest of the cable, for the cable end here, or housing end. I'm going to straighten it out real quick with my pliers. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, got everything snapped back in. Got these screws in here and here, and the one back over there. Haven't done underneath the bumper yet. Kind of working my way from this end of the scooter back towards this end. Next thing I got to do is put the rack back on. I started by putting the inside bolt for the grab handles first, and then I'll line everything else up back here and put the long bolts in for the rack. And then I've got the two down there, so I'm just kind of working my way back. I can also put, once this rack's tightened, then I can put the seat pan back in. I could probably put the seat pan back in right now, but I still need to tighten these once it's once the rack's on. So getting it a little at a time on each side. That's pretty tight. Yeah, it's pretty solid. I got those two back ones. I think I'll put the seat pan in next and the battery and go ahead and test it. Okay, just doing a final test before I completely button everything down. All I got really left is the battery cover and the seat. Checking for rattles. Sounds good. Make sure all the lights work, turn signals, horn, kill switch, and yes, it's working as well. So far pretty good. Okay, there it is. It's all done. It took me about 4 hours. But some will say I'm slow, but I also did a lot of other things. I did a lot of cleanup. I checked vacuum lines. I pulled the plug, took a look at it. I got a bunch of tape residue off the body. I just basically went through it one end to the other. Had to move some clamps. They're little spring clamps. They suck. I'm probably going to end up replacing them with real hose clamps eventually. But they'd slid off, or somebody didn't put them back on, so did a lot of that. Tightened the ground wire on it. Just really gave it a real thorough going over. So like I said, about 4 hours. And I actually started on it way back like at 3 o'clock, and it's like 9 now, but I spent about 2.5 hours doing some other things around the house and talking on the phone while I was working on it, a few other things. Like I said, it's all back together. It's running great. The last thing I need to do is I still do need to change the oil. I'm going to do that tomorrow. We're still going to have ugly weather, but yeah, sweet.